Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
You're in your home studio there. I can see these little lights behind you, and
yes, yeah, this is my living room where I work.
right. So your living room is where is that where you do all your work, or do you still go to other studios to work?
No, I've been here about 4 or 5 years now, so
Okay.
it works really well.
So how do you escape work?
Well, you don't. You're either always at home or you're always at work. It's like, depending on which way you look at it.
Right.
But it works very well, actually, because I do quite a lot of work with people in England, and so 8 o'clock in the morning when they're all getting up and getting caffeinated, it's like they decide that they have to have some stuff, so I can just kind of deal with it. Otherwise if I had a studio that was separate, I couldn't do that.
Right. Is
Yeah.
that was that always the dream to have your own space?
No, not really. I've sort of gone back and forth several times. I've worked in studios, and in fact, I used to have the idea that working in a studio is good because if nobody works in studios, they'll disappear completely. So I wouldn't mind actually, if the right situation, I wouldn't mind working. It's quite nice to be around, a group of other people that are doing things and
Hmm.
sort of like-minded fellow sufferers in the audio realm,
Right.
something like that. But no, it works. It works well. I like it. It
Yeah.
works well, especially since I don't like to go out much anyway. So,
Uh,
you know.
that comes in
Well, and
handy.
and COVID, and then I ended up in an ideal situation. Really, I didn't have to go anywhere, so it's
Yeah.
good.
So when you were choosing the house that you live in now, were you consciously looking for a space where you could set up a studio and work in there?
Well, the living room in my house has these nice kind of high ceilings with the sloping sides. So when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, I think this would work actually really well,
Mm.
and it does. It works really well. Now, I think the main thing to avoid, if you can, is low ceilings. Actually, low ceilings are a huge problem, I think. So yeah, no, it's worked out very well. I think I
What
can do work. I think my work's better actually as a result of, I can come out here at 11 o'clock and look at what I did and during the day, and that's terrible. I'm going to do it again. That kind of thing. It's nice.
Yeah, what's the problem with low ceilings? So I come at this question not knowing anything about acoustics or mastering or the perfect environment. Why no low ceilings?
I'm not an acoustic. I'm not really a technical person, so I don't really have a very good answer for that. It's just my experience of being in spaces that have low ceilings. It's very difficult to tell what's going on for some reason.
Okay.
Not It's just I don't. I don't feel that it's very nice. I don't feel like it's good to work in those kind of spaces. Of course, sometimes you don't have a choice, but you know.
Yeah. I think I'd read an interview with you where you were saying, and this may have been some years ago now, but you were saying you tend to listen in sort of 2 hour bursts. You'll do work for about
Yeah,
2 hours and then take a break. Is that still the case?
right. Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, well, the big disadvantage with working at home is that the kitchen is right there. So you work a bit and then you snack, and pretty soon you weigh like 200 pounds plus. Like you got to be careful. But yeah, I don't like to. I'm not really a grinder. I don't like to work for more than about 5 or 6 hours a day. I mean, I could, but I can get as much stuff done as I need to in that space of time usually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is that about ear preservation? That not wanting to work more than
Uh,
5 or 6 hours a day?
mm, no, not really. It's just about sort of concentration. It's a lot of, when you're working on stuff, it's a lot of decisions. In fact, I didn't realize, until one day I was asked to do a panel. People started asking questions about mastering, and I was amazed at how much there was to it. because I always thought it was like really straightforward and there was nothing that you could say about it. But once you start thinking about it, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of information. You're working with a stereo mix, and it's like, you know, there's just all these different things going on that you have to somehow sort of wrangle it into a pleasing arrangement, or maybe it's already in a pleasing arrangement and you just don't mess it up, you know. That's possible too. But, you know, yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a lot of thinking.
Yeah, but that's so interesting that you weren't even really that conscious of it until you really sort of sat down and thought about it.
No, I think that's the benefit of teaching something, actually, is that you learn actually by teaching.
Sure.
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. What's the last, I mean, so if you're working for 5 to 6 hours a day, are you still then actively listening to other works as well to try and look for people who are doing something interesting in the mastering space, or just to keep your ears trained?
Yeah, you know, I probably should do that. That's a good idea, actually. I do listen to, I listen to Kendrick's new album, for example, which was mastered by Michelle Mancini. But it's always difficult to know with mastering, you know, what it was like before it was mastered. I mean, maybe it's the same, you know, or maybe they really did a lot to it. It's hard, you can't tell. Okay. So it's hard to assess. I mean, you kind of can. You can kind of figure out, you know, that it was mastered with a certain way, but it's not obvious all the time. So I don't know. I don't really listen to very much music other than the stuff I work on, honestly.
Okay.
I don't really like listening to music, you know. No,
really? Is that why some people, you see sometimes mastering referred to as a dark art? Is that because there is that inability to know exactly what happened in that process when you're listening to something?
Well, to me, I don't know about a dark art. I think it's basically, it's an aesthetic that you have. There's a couple of different ways of thinking about it, actually. Some people, because I look at these, you know, sorry, my cat's down here who's demanding attention. So.
Oh, show him to the world.
All right, I will. Here we go. Oh, she's not going to like it, though. Come on. Oh. There we are.
Hello. Who's this?
She's hating it.
What's her name?
Her name is Michelle.
Michelle. Yeah. Very cute.
Yeah, what was I talking about?
So you're talking about the aesthetic.
Yeah, there's sort of a view of mastering that some people have that I see, that then they say, you know, the mixer and the producer are already decided how they want it to sound, and the mastering engineer shouldn't make any artistic decisions. And that's one way of looking at it. I, on the other hand, feel like people send me stuff because they want me to do something. So, you know, that my approach to it is like that. So basically the skill is listening. That's the actual skill. It's not like operating the equipment. Well, you know, you have to know about computers, and you have to know about what a compressor is and how it works. But that's easy. You know, the real skill is listening. And over many, many years of listening, you know, I'd say it probably takes about 10 years to get good at it. And that's the thing. Then you kind of, you know, you basically, you know, usually when I get something, I listen to it, and within a second or two, I can hear how I want it to sound. And then there are various options, like, do you go out of the box? Do you use tube gear? Do you use solid state gear? You know, which lately I've been really hitting the tube stuff, which I'm surprised that I get away with it, actually.
Why is that? Why?
Well, because it kind of does a lot to the sound, you know, tubes and transformers, and it spreads it all out. It's all crazy, you know. So, but people seem to be liking it. So yeah, it's you just try different things until you kind of get the sound that you heard in your head, I think is what it is. And then, you know, and then you have to just stop messing around with it.
Right. How closely do you tend to work with the artist or the mix engineer? Do they tend to give you notes, or are you literally going from when you said you can hear within a couple of seconds how you think it should
Yeah.
sound? Are you clearly just going through that?
Yeah, well, most of it is, you know, it's like any business. It's about relationships. That's kind of how it is. As you work, you know, you're friends, you help each other out, you support each other, and so forth. So yeah, some people are super picky, and you know they've mixed it a certain way, and it sounds a certain way, and they don't really want you to. They want you to do something but not do anything, which is is an interesting challenge, you know. And, most people, though, you know, they just send it and they're like, yeah, just do your thing, you know, do what you
Okay.
want.
And someone's just put a question in the chat where they were saying, and you may have just answered it, but basically saying, how often do artists input or ask for revisions during the mastering process?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes you get it, you just completely nail it, you know. Sometimes there's some specific thing that they're looking for. You know, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing because basically they know the music much better than you do because they've heard it hundreds and hundreds of it. You're just listening to it once. So sometimes there are things that you're not aware of that you've done something that's changed. You know, like there's more reverb on it because you've compressed it, or any number of things that yeah. So you basically, I mean, my approach to it is like, just whatever you want. Just tell me what you want. You know, I send you something, you listen to it. If you like it, if you don't like it, sometimes you have to actually encourage people. Sometimes I say to people, look, don't be afraid. If you don't like it, tell me, because sometimes people won't. You know, I've had that experience where you just don't hear from them. You know, and so sometimes I'll even, if I haven't heard from them in a week, I'll write to them. I'll say, is there anything that I need to, you know, do you want me to have another go at it? Or,
who do you actually? Oh, sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say it's an interesting point. I mean, who are you actually serving when you're mastering? Are you serving the artist, the listener, the A&R, the management? Who is your number one person you need to please?
Well, sometimes there are good A&R people who really know what's going on, and sometimes they'll be the ones who will, you know, make suggestions and stuff. Because they have, you know, a vision of how they want the artist to sound, but that doesn't happen very often. So, you know, it's usually the producer. Sometimes the mixer will chime in. The artist, well, it depends how big of an artist it is. Like if they're like, you know, famous or semi-famous, whatever, then you'll just deal with their manager. Basically, they'll sort of translate, which is quite a good thing, because sometimes there's like, I have this one client that I work with in London, and I actually met him when he came out here, and he was like, my notes on the mixes and the mastering are absolutely brutal, and she filters them out. You know, she kind of knows how to put it in a nicer way. So that thing. But yeah, a lot of times you'll talk to the artist, but most of the stuff, honestly, you know, most of the stuff is fine. There's no problem. It's only an issue if it's some type of music that is sort of a bit kind of outside of the norm. You know, if it's pop music, it's defined. You know, I know how that's supposed to sound, and very rarely are there any changes or anything. If it would be something like some experimental noise or some music or something like that, then that's gonna take a bit more.
Well, that's interesting, because there is such a diversity to your CV, your resume, the artists and the projects you've worked on. You mentioned noise there, and you know that you've worked with the Locust, who are a fantastic band, very frantic.
proudest achievement. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that I don't often think about. But yes, that was extraordinary. I mean, that particular record, as I recall, it was mixed to tape, and so I didn't really mess with the sound of it very much. It was just a question of transferring it, like getting a high quality transfer, because it was already. I mean, what are you gonna start EQing the locus? Like, kind of is what it is, you know. It's like there's not much to do with it really. But that was the album. Yeah, there's like, I don't know how many songs there were, but there was only, like, most of them were about a minute long.
Right.
So
No, it doesn't matter if you're not a fan of the genre. You can just I mean, how does that affect your approach? Do you have to familiarize yourself with the genre, or do you just play what's in front of you?
No, I think you just work with what's in front of you. Honestly, everything is different, you know, and that's the great thing about this job, is that you know, it's like who was it? Pablo Casals, a cello player. Somebody asked him why do you still, he's like 80 years old, why do you still practice 6 hours a day? And his reply was, because I think I'm getting better.
Right.
And so that's basically, I feel the same way, you know, everything that comes in is different. And yeah, you do get better. I think my work's improved over the last sort of 4 or 5 years a lot. I think other people might not agree. I don't know.
Yeah. Asking about your background as a musician. So I wanted to delve back into that a little bit. Is it true that you first picked up a guitar because you found one in the laundry in your school?
Yes, that is true. That is true. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that basically, well, I have this saying, which is kind of semi-humorous, which is that basically all engineers are failed musicians, and mastering engineers are failed musicians who don't have the social skills needed to run a, basically. So I think there's some truth to that. I don't know. You know, playing music is basically, if you're playing, you know, in front of a crowd and it's going over, that's probably the most fun thing of anything. Personally, I don't, it's what happens when you're not on stage, that you have to deal with all this stuff, you know, traveling, and I don't particularly like being in large groups of people either. So,
right,
like, when you're on stage, okay, you're sort of like, you know, you got some space, but
sure. How serious were you about it? Were you serious in
well,
terms of pursuing it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I have the musical ability to do it. But you know, what happened was I you know, I focused on guitar for a while, and I practiced, like, you know, a couple of hours a day maybe for like a year, and then I went to see Jeff Beck play, and I was like, you know what, he was better after a week than I was after a year. Like, I mean, you know, with the amount of the dedication required, if you want to be a guitar guy, was more than I could honestly. I mean, you know, you spend 10 hours a day practicing. And then what are you? You're a guitar player, you know? It's kind of fun, I guess. But yeah, I didn't really, you know, I didn't really I didn't really want to spend all that time practicing. That's what it was, I think. But I love, you know, music obviously is, you know, it's just, you know, I just, and so now I've come to admire the people that do it, and I really, you know, I know what goes into it. It's a tremendous amount. I have like nothing but respect and admiration for my clients, because it's really difficult.
Mm.
You've got to learn to play or sing or both. You know, you have to do Instagram Live, you have to, you know, do the TikTok thing, you have to write, it's amazing, the amount of work it is, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But so did you always have an interest in behind the scenes though, even while you were playing? Were you interested in what happens on the other side of the recording glass?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, when I started mastering, I was working in San Francisco, and there was a guy who had worked at Bernie Grumman, mastering in LA, and I remember watching him work, and he just did this sort of tiny little EQ move, like somewhere in the sort of mid range, and it just kind of changed the whole character of the whole thing. And I thought that was really interesting. It really does. It's like you think it's a subtle change, and some people might not be able to hear it. I don't know, but it changes the character of the whole thing in a very interesting way. Maybe you just bring the voice forward a little bit. Like one of my favorite things is so like 1.5, 1.7K, just a little, like if you're using a digital EQ, just like a tenth of the dB with fairly narrow, just a little point. And it's amazing how that makes the vocal, it does all kinds of interesting things. It's quite magical, actually.
Yeah. So after you've seen that little EQ change, you've witnessed that happening in the studio. What's your next step? What's your next step into actually becoming a masterer?
Well, it just takes a long time. You're asking about the business part of it?
No, just literally, how did you move into it? So you've witnessed that little magical thing happening, and you've thought, well, I want to do this. How do you actually go into making that happen?
Yeah, so basically you need clients. That's what you need. So basically your friends, people that your circle of acquaintance. And really, in my experience, what it is because there's a couple different things. So, some people like apprentice with a famous person who's works with a lot of well-known artists. And they've kind of got a different path, it's quicker. And then in my case, I just kept doing it and kept doing it. And eventually, you know enough people to support yourself. Are you still, are we still on?
Yeah. Can you see me and hear me?
Okay, hang on. Let me change. There, that's better.
Yep.
I think.
Can you hear me?
God, really? Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Somewhat, anyway.
All right. We'll just go for a little bit longer because technology is not on our side today.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. When did you get confident at mastering? When did you think, I know what I'm doing, and this is going to be my path?
Yeah, I haven't got there yet.
Really?
I mean, everything. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's kind of like you send work out, and you just hope that people like it. But you don't know, it's like, or sometimes you have a pretty good idea that it's sounding pretty good, but that's as I said, that's what keeps it fresh. It's like you're learning actually every day. Every day is different. Every song is different. There's different. It was recorded different. The different instruments, different vocals. So it's sort of endlessly fascinating, basically. To me, it's kind of the way it is. But yeah, confident. Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I'm fairly confident that I believe I can do it.
I mean, when you get Grammy awards and multi-platinum certifications, does that not give you a bit of is it still hard to look at that and think, I'm actually good at this now? Or do you still have those insecurities despite those awards?
Yeah, I wouldn't really call it insecurities necessarily. I just say that it's like you just don't know. It's like you just don't know. People hear things differently. People kind of have different ideas about how they want things to sound, and so yeah, you never really know. But it's rare that I get the email that says we've decided to go in a different direction.
Right.
That does happen occasionally, not very often. Yeah.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to ask you about was your partnership with Billie Eilish and Phineas, who you clearly have a great working relationship with. How did that come to be? How did that even start?
How did it get started?
Yeah, how did you come to work with Billie and Phineas?
So, it actually it was sort of organic. When I think Phineas was about 15 or something like that, I worked on this album called Language and Perspective. It's a Bad Sons album, it's actually quite a well-known album. And it's really good. So it was produced by Eric Palmquist, and he mixed it as well. It sounded really good. And that was Phineas's favorite album. So he sent me an email and said, would you master my album? And I was like, of course. Why wouldn't I? And so that was kind of how it got started, really. Then there's the Ocean Eyes thing, and he was like, actually they sent that they wanted me to mix it. And I was like, well, I don't really have a mixing rig. I don't really I'm not really set up for it. So so I sent them to Rob Kinelski. And then so then we worked together for the next 5 years or so. And what was it, 2020 to 2020 Grammys, right before COVID, they swept. It was an amazing experience. It was like sort of, quite unbelievable, actually. But yeah, it's a good thing to have that experience, and but you still just are working. You still just have to do the work. It's not like it doesn't get any easier.
Sure. But do you remember when you first received When We All Fall Asleep? Where Do We Go? Do you remember pulling that up for the first time?
Yes, I do remember that. And I remember thinking that I really liked it. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan, obviously. I thought it was a great album. And I knew that her fans would really like it. But I didn't realize that her fans' mothers and fathers and grandparents would like it as well. It just became incredibly popular. So it was a lot of fun to see that, to see somebody do that. Like from a distance. I mean, it's not like I played a huge part in it or anything. Far from it. But, the trajectory of it was quite amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very last thing, John. So throughout your career, I'm sure there have been many changes in mastering, whether it's the analog to digital age, or the Atmos mixing coming in, or the loudness wars. Is there one development which has been the most challenging to adapt to?
I don't think it's really changed at all for me, actually. I mean, I don't. It's like, I mean, I used to use tape. I used to use a tape machine once in a while, which I don't anymore. I don't really like that. I guess my sort of ideas about how things sound has changed a bit. I'm not a huge fan of stuff mixed on analog consoles. It's kind of stuff is it's easier to sort it out in the workstation, honestly. And besides, the console is so much wire, and everything's kind of slow, But I don't think the job has really changed much. I mean, basically, here it is, really. The main, it's like, you're trying to give somebody something that will put them in the best possible position to compete, artistically and commercially, whatever. And so that's always what you're thinking about. It's like how can I really send this person something that'll really help them in their career? And that's kind of, I think that's really the main thing.
Okay,
So,
John. I think the Wi-Fi again is starting to play against us. So I'm just going to say thank you very, very much for your time. It's really appreciated. It's been so great to chat to you, and keep doing all the good work you're doing, because we love hearing all the music that's coming out of that place, that studio that you're in right now.
well, thank you very much, Rod. It was just really nice talking to you.
Thank you, John.
I hope it was useful to somebody. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to say. Basically, it's a really good idea to work on yourself. Like, practice meditation, do some yoga, try to be a better person, because that's like the most important thing, actually, in your relationships with people, the way you deal with people. So that's I think it's something that people don't talk about very much. It's kind of mental health, really. And I think a lot of people kind of have this idea that you spend 18 hours a day working, and I mean that's what I was saying before. It's just, that'll drive you crazy, basically. Well, maybe some people can deal with it, but just kind of be a good person.
Yeah. Is that where, because I know I believe you're a practicing Buddhist. Has Buddhism been really central to you adopting that mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the basic thing about the basic idea. Well, one of the basic ideas of Buddhism is that if your moods are tied to success or failure, then you're going to be very unstable. Like if somebody fires you or they don't like your work, then you're going to get really upset. So the idea is to sort of, through meditation and so forth, is to just not be dependent on things going well or badly. And I think that's really the key to the whole thing.
And that's helped you throughout your career?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I used to get into a bad mood for weeks if somebody didn't like my work, And now I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, they send it to somebody. That's nice, good. That's fine. So
that's very important. That's super important. That's a great lesson.
No, it's super, super important, because I mean, if somebody sends something to somebody else, you're not going to work with these people forever, and they want a different sound, or they want to work with somebody else, or there's a lot of talented people around. It's not a problem, It's so yeah, I think those things are actually very important. Otherwise, there's no point in being successful and miserable,
Absolutely,
so.
Absolutely. That's a great note on which to end, John. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great evening where you are.
Okay, well, thanks very much.
Thanks, John. See you soon.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.